You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram.
Hi, I'm Monika Loveday. I've been a women's officer and vice president of the German Cricket Association, currently the national team manager, and you're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly podcast.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly podcast. And on the podcast, we have started a new series on the podcast looking at associate nations within cricket and how they are developing the game in their country. Many of us cricket fans know so much about the established cricketing countries and not enough on the associate nations who play cricket. So it would be nice to learn more about those associate countries, and via the podcast, people can learn more as well. For today's Associate Cricket Series episode, we are discussing all things Germany cricket. Joining me to discuss and talk all things Germany cricket is the former women's officer and vice president of the German Cricket Federation, Monika Loveday. Monika, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
It's great to have you here, Monika, and it's wonderful to have a chat with you today about all things German cricket. Now,
thanks for having me. Yeah.
Who's a part of the women's team, the Golden Eagles in Germany. We had a chat to her a few weeks back on the podcast about her career and about women's cricket in Germany, which was fantastic. And for those who haven't watched or seen that episode or listened to it, we'll leave links to those in the description for people to listen to, because it was a great interview and a great chat that I had with Tina about women's cricket and her career in Germany. But with you today, Monika, we're going to be chatting about all things German cricket, so the whole shebang, basically, every aspect that you can possibly cover in an hour or so in this episode of the podcast today about German cricket, because lots of things have happened over the years and developments and some good work behind the scenes. You can tell us about that because you've worked behind the scenes and still a part of it today. So I think for many people watching and listening will be a great learning for them as well about cricket in Germany, because you don't really associate cricket and Germany. You associate it with other sports than cricket. So
yeah,
it'll
definitely
be a great insight for people in this episode today to learn more about, excuse me, about cricket in Germany, which is fantastic. But before we do that, Monika, before we talk about all those things, as I mentioned, as I do with all my guests, I like to take them back to when they first got into cricket. And it's been very fascinating listening to people's memories on how they started to get into cricket, Monika. So let's go back to the very beginning of your cricket journey, Monika. What were your earliest memories of watching, playing, and even going to the cricket?
Oh, the earliest memories. And I mean, I was quite, well, in nowadays terms, quite old when I first started with cricket. I was beginning 20s, because obviously I grew up, I'm German through and through. My parents are German, and don't let the red hair fool you. I am German. And so I grew up playing handball and then a bit of football. But at that time, until I was 19, 20, I wouldn't have been able to tell you what cricket is. And then basically I moved to England for work placement. And because people in England didn't know what handball was, and football for women wasn't great either, I started to look for a new sport. And the house I actually lived in at that time, it was a flat share with mainly guys, and they all watched cricket on BBC, I think it was at the time, or ITV, but it was a free to air basically channel, and they watched it, and so I started to watch it and thought it was quite interesting and quite curious, and started to look for a women's team to join, to start and try out. And that's how I started.
Yeah, it's quite interesting with people who don't come from a traditional background on how they discover the game, because it's a very unique, different path to the game because you haven't grown up with it or you haven't experienced it. So in your case, when you went over to England, you watched cricket, you learned cricket, and you played cricket over there and took it back to Germany, and we all know what happened there. Cricket took off in Germany and all that stuff. So yeah, so it is quite interesting when you look back on how you got into the game. Everyone's different. Everyone has a different path. Everyone's quite similar in terms if you come from a traditional cricket upbringing or background. Whereas if you're from an associate country, for example, you discover the game in a different way as well. But it always has a connection as well. So did you play some cricket over there in terms of organised cricket, club cricket over there in England?
I joined the club. So I played one season for the first club I joined, and then due to distance and whatever, after a year, I joined another club called South Northumberland in Newcastle. And they were really brilliant because they basically set up a new women's team with almost all beginners. Our best player was then 11-year-old Amy Campbell, who plays for the Central Sparks. So yeah, at the time she was basically the best player, and the rest were older women in their late teens or early 20s who just got dragged into trying to play cricket. So, but it meant that everybody was on the same level, and they really did the basics well of how to field and how to bat, how to hold a bat, and everything. And then, yeah, that was just really good. And the club was quite keen on growing women's cricket, so they put a lot of effort in and supported us as a team. They went through a refurbishment of the facilities. So when I first started, they had like an old shed with 2 lanes in it for the winter. By the time I left, they had this state-of-the-art indoor facility with 4 lanes, which is still there now, and a superb ground and everything. I was lucky enough to have Martin Spade as a coach at some point, who's now at Setchfield, I think it's called, school in Cumbria, ex-Sussex player. I'm sorry, I get them confused. But yeah, he was a brilliant coach. So yeah. And then I did play, so I played for that club. I did play for Northumberland a few matches, a county team. One of them was actually against Daniel Hazel, who played for Durham. She was actually a seam bowler at the time, fairly quick, before she turned to spin. So yeah, that was quite interesting and a bit, scary.
Yes, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was sort of the journey in England. I did my coaching level 1 there as well. Yeah, and then sort of after 12 years, I moved back to Germany. It was like a job opportunity. The company I worked for just outside of Newcastle, they also have sites in Germany. And the opportunity came up, and I thought, just for a couple of years, let's see what happens. And yeah, that was 16 years ago now. So I think I'm back in Germany for good.
Yes. Well, we lose track, do we, over time, do we? Time flies, and we lose track, I suppose. But so how did it, the connection with you and cricket in Germany happen? How did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, at the time it was still a pretty small setup. So I mean, I went to Cologne, or near Cologne, where my work was, and I was lucky enough to find a club in Cologne, that was quite inclusive, and try to again do a bit of women's cricket when there wasn't really any women's cricket around at the time. So we're talking here 2008. There were some girls' cricket. I think there was in the north of Germany, in Oldenburg, a school which was quite successful in having a girls' section. And then one in the east, Schwerin, and one in the south in Munich. But that was all girls' cricket, so under 16s basically. But women's cricket wasn't really a thing. Sort of the odd woman here and there, but not really anything. But yeah, I have to say it has, since I've been in Germany, the German Cricket Association has always been fairly supportive of women's cricket. So they tried to enhance it and do more. And in 2009, we tried to set up the first national team. So we had sort of trials in Austria, in Vienna. I think that came through connections, mainly from Steffi Frohnmeier, who was studying in Austria at the time, but she was from Munich.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and yeah, it was quite funny because I mean, obviously, with my background in having played in England, I was sort of seen as, first of all, I was the oldest player. And the most experienced, and the board sort of asked me, well, do you not want to do the coaching? Do you want to be the coach? Well, not really. I do still want to play, but yeah, I mean, if there's nobody else or whatever, there was a coach, but he was really young. He was only, I think, 2021. And they thought he was too young to fulfill that role. But he still came to that selection trial weekend. And I thought afterwards, well, actually, he can do it. It's his age shouldn't play a part in that. He's
yeah.
Yeah. After that, he basically was the official coach of the first women's national team, even if it were no real officially sanctioned, ICC sanctioned matches. I think the first thing after that came was an indoor tournament against Denmark. Denmark were quite strong at that point. So yeah, and that were the first matches we played, indoor and outdoor, against Denmark, and they beat us easily. Yeah. And then in 2010, actually, the board asked me to become the women's officer for Germany, with the emphasis of growing women's cricket. So from 2010, we had about, if we scraped everybody together, we had about 3 teams in Germany, and that was scraping like together, combining players to form a team. And stuff like that. So it was quite scraping the barrel. It was quite hard work. But yeah, as I say, the support from the board was at the time was really good, and got more and more money every year. We got a bit more money, and yeah, a lot of excuse me, a lot of campaigning throughout the country to convince men that they should invest in women's cricket. And yeah, quite difficult at times, especially in associate countries. I think if you really have a lack of facilities, and then you get women's teams who seen as competition for these few facilities you have got, it is quite challenging.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. It can be a challenge trying to start from scratch, basically, without any foundation. You have to try and build it up as the years progress, and that. But Germany has done that over the years, and it's taken a lot of work. And as we get into our chat, we'll talk about those different aspects of German cricket and how they've developed and grown over the years. But going back to your journey, it's quite interesting listening to your cricket journey and your introductions to the game and how it carried over to Germany as well until now, which is fantastic. So thank you for sharing that with us, Monika, about your experiences and early memories and introduction to the game.
So I mean, I maybe also have to say that because I was in Cologne, which is almost bordering Holland and the Netherlands and Belgium as well. But for me, it was really lucky because at that time I played most of my cricket in the Netherlands. I joined the team in the Netherlands to actually continue playing because there weren't many matches available for me to play in Germany. So in that sense, it was quite lucky that I was so close to the Dutch border and could continue playing a decent level of cricket while at the same time trying to build up cricket in Germany.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And you need these things to align, I suppose, the stars to align, and you'd be in the right place at the right time, and that's just how it happened and how it played out. So that's fantastic. And the Netherlands, of course, have been playing cricket for years. They've been pretty good at it, and they're getting better. And we actually spoke to Bertus de Jong about Dutch cricket. He was the first episode for this Associate Cricket Series episode when we started way back at the end of last year in December. And that was pretty interesting, talking about Dutch cricket and how that's developed over the years. So, it's fantastic to hear that connection that you have with the Netherlands in terms of playing cricket. And it's just fantastic. That's what cricket does. You can find ways of playing the game in many different locations and countries. But to hear about your journey and how you got into it was fantastic. So thank you for sharing that with us, Monika. I thought we, to start this interview on German cricket, Monika, I thought we'd talk about the history of cricket in Germany, because you can learn a lot about cricket from its history. And the history of cricket in Germany is quite interesting. So Monika, can you give us a brief overview on the history of cricket in Germany? How did it become a thing in Germany? How did it all start?
How it all started, we're going back to the late 1800s, actually. And that's always my fun fact, that there was a German Cricket and Football Association before there was a German Football Association. So that's it didn't last long, by the way, but that's how it started. And it basically was similar to the football. It was this attempt to give a team sport to Germany and like to keep people healthy and keep them active. And an alternative to just like gymnastics, what was sort of the done thing at the time to keep the men fit, but that was something different and came sort of at the same time as a football. It then sort of obviously Hitler had something against cricket because he basically eradicated it. So after the Second World War, it was almost non-existing. But then we had the British military who was stationed in Germany and had their own teams and their own pitches. And they were, even years after, I mean, when I went back to Germany, I played on one military base a couple of times, and they were the best pitches in Germany at the time, even sort of in 2008 or 9. Although at that time the British were already on the way of leaving Germany for good, or already mostly gone. So the British military had it after the Second World War, and then after that came the immigration from Indian, Pakistani guest workers who brought it with them, and then the students. And then coming 2015, the big refugee, well, some call it a crisis. For us, it was a huge challenge because suddenly we had thousands of people who wanted to play cricket in Germany, coming from Afghanistan and Pakistan. So it made a huge difference to men's cricket in Germany. It didn't to women's cricket. It didn't affect women's cricket at all because obviously it was mainly men who came to Germany. The few women were like mothers and wives who never played and had no desire to play. Whereas for the single young men, it was their connection to home, and that what sort of helped them to cope with the strange life in Germany.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite interesting that all associate countries have a similar introduction to cricket, isn't it? Because of the British and how they introduced cricket into all these countries around the world, obviously. But yeah, no, with Germany, that's the same case, obviously, in terms of the British and introducing cricket in the early 1800s and all that stuff. And obviously during the Second World War as well. Obviously it's carried on from that moment on, really. It's starting to get back on track and grow and develop, which it has over the last many years. So yeah, you know, it's quite fascinating cricket history when you read up about history of cricket. I'm a history buff myself. I like the history and I like looking back at the game's history. But finding out these different facts and researching about associate countries in particular, how it became a thing, really, cricket, is fantastic to discover. And it's similar in some aspects, as I mentioned, with the British involvement. But, you know, just other things as well, just playing the game, loving the game, enthusiastic about the game. And that's what I've learned in this associate cricket series. Whenever I ask that question to anyone, Monika, they always say the same thing. It's quite interesting to learn more about how the game originated in the country and how it's continued to prosper and grow to the current day. So yeah, no, it's fantastic to hear that. And I think many people watching or listening would say the same thing. Oh, I didn't know that. So a lot of our listeners and watchers have learned something new about the history of cricket in Germany, which is fantastic. And that's what you want from these type of episodes, is about learning, understanding about these associate countries a bit more. So I think a lot of people would learn something new from listening to you just speak about the history of cricket in Germany there, Monika. So that's fantastic to hear your overview on the history of cricket in Germany, which was fantastic. I thought now, Monika, let's talk about the Germany national cricket teams, the women's and men's, and it'd be good to gain your insights on the two teams and learn more about their achievements, the player stories, because many of the players come from diverse backgrounds, as you just mentioned previously when we talked about the history of the game in Germany. But Monika, for those who may not know a lot about the Germany women's and men's teams, can you tell us more about them, the players, and some of the stories?
Oh yeah, that's quite an open question. Where to start? I'll start with the women's team anyway, because I know them a lot better than the men's team. So yeah, as you say, quite a diverse group. we always prided ourselves on having about 3/4, and that might not be quite as true anymore, but of German nationals, like born and bred in Germany. And I sometimes like to say where the parents didn't know what cricket is, what the kids playing there. And then obviously students who moved to Germany and then became eligible through residency and things like that. So, or where the parents are from an Asian background and sort of started cricket through that. I mean, our captain is quite an interesting story. So Anuradha Balapur, she actually played at the same club as me in England at South Northumberland, but like the year after I had left. So we didn't meet. Well, we did meet there once, but we didn't realize. We didn't know each other at the time. And then she did her master's there and then moved to Frankfurt to do her PhD. And she took a while, I think a year, before she then phoned me and asked about women's cricket in Germany. And that was, that's when we connected for the first time knowingly. But again, small world, found out about all the people we both know. So yeah, that was quite funny. And then obviously we had Tina and Kartika, who only started to play seriously cricket in Germany. She played basketball in India, and Steffi Frohnmeier, who's our residential physio and doctor in the meantime as well. So we've got a few doctors in the team. So Anne Sam, our volunteer firefighter, she is also a doctor in toxicology. If I said that right. Yeah. And then a few more. Can't name everybody, but it is quite a diverse group. Different backgrounds and but a really nice group to be around. Good fun. And the men's national team, I don't know that many players personally. I mean, I've come across them at times. Quite a few. Some of them are refugees who came in 2015 as students. Not so many who've grown up here. A couple who've grown up in Germany. But they also get support. I mean, the women get support from some English-based players, and the men as well. So Dieter Klein or Michael Richardson. They're sort of the well-known names or better-known names. In women's cricket, you don't know them. The women players who support us. They play county cricket, Middlesex and the Kent, or were in the setup at least. That's sort of bit of a background to the national teams.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that about the two teams and how they've come together and bounded and bonded together to play for Germany. In terms of, from your perspective over the years, when observing both teams, obviously the women's team you're involved in because you're part of the setup there, but also the men's team as well. Have you noticed that both teams have gotten better over the years in terms of standard and quality of cricket?
Yeah, definitely. I think for the women, it's also there's more competition. I mean, when I started, there wasn't I mean, we went to one tournament in Jersey with 10 players because we actually, I mean, there was one late dropout, but still, I mean, there was no thought about going with 14 players. We wouldn't have been able to get 14 players of a decent enough standard to go. So we went with 11, and then somebody dropped out, so we went with 10. And nowadays, I mean, in the standard setup, there are probably close to 30 who are in the contention of being selected. There is still a difference between 20 and up to 30, but it wouldn't hurt that much. Yeah. So, and for the men, it's even more so. I mean, in overall, there are about 6,000 to 7,000 players in Germany. And I guess women players about 250 to 300, something like that. So just alone from the competition, the standard has gone up because, yeah, you need to work harder in all areas of the game, fitness, and then your speciality to get a look in. So yeah, definitely yes.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear that it's improved and gotten better from when it first started in the early days until now. Obviously, it's becoming a bit more professional. Not quite a professional level yet, but getting there, which is good. And both teams and the players want to learn more and develop as cricketers. And obviously, it can be very hard, can it? Because not everyone, obviously, it's not professional, obviously. Not like Brazil with their women's team. And I spoke to Matt Featherston about that on the series, about Brazil putting their women's team as professional because they thought that is the best way for them to do well and develop the game in Brazil, whereas the men's team were just struggling a bit. So they made them professional, and he provided some good points and interesting points when we chatted to him about that. Mm-hmm. But here in Germany, both teams are not professional as yet. And they have jobs, and as you mentioned with the women's side, they're all professionals in terms of their chosen field of doctors, which is quite handy to have, I suppose, and do other things. Same with the men as well. So it's very hard to get the groups together, isn't it, to train and bond together. So how's that challenge being met head on?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a challenge, but I mean, all the girls, and I can talk more about the girls, obviously, because I'm closer to them and know more about the setup there. It's a dedication. They will probably dedicate half of their annual leave, if not more, to cricket. And yeah, it's really hard that you can't sort of, yeah, can't pay them for that. But it's just you have to understand that the employment laws in Germany are quite tough, and it's quite expensive to employ people. So you wouldn't be able to pay players enough to live on unless they're students, like and sort of support their studies with that. Then it would be fine. But once you're in a full-time profession, you will always earn more with that than you would ever with cricket in Germany. So, but yeah, it's a tough one. But as I say, the group is so dedicated that they will do it because they love the sport. They love to play, and I mean, I guess the reward is to be able to travel to places where you wouldn't necessarily go otherwise. I mean, as Tina mentioned, we've been to Oman and Rwanda, and and then obviously in Europe the qualifiers. But yeah, it's yeah, that is sort of the reward.
Yeah, definitely. That's the goal and the ambition, I suppose, to try and work to, and try and sacrifice a lot to try and achieve that, which many associate players have to do in order to just play cricket and support themselves, really, and try and do what they can to support the game and encourage other people to take up cricket as well, be role models and leaders, I suppose, which is fantastic to hear. Regarding that, in terms of the culture, in terms of the team culture and that, obviously everyone comes from diverse backgrounds, different countries, different languages. Not everyone speaks German or English. They speak in their native tongues. So many associate nations have to try and balance that as well in terms of the culture side of things and trying to get everyone on the same page and understand certain things of what's going on and all that stuff when you're playing, especially communication on the field is very important. So how both teams are trying to navigate that challenge, Monika?
So yeah, the women's team at one point tried to do more in German on the field. It didn't quite work, just because all the terminology and everybody is so used to the English terms. And even though our coaches, so the last one, Michael, who'd been in there 5 years, was really keen to learn German, and he did quite well. And the new coach, Alistair, is also doing some German lessons to learn some German, but in the end, it's usually English on the field, unless there's really something which the opposition shouldn't hear about. Then somebody might say it in German, and most will understand it. I think for most players, German is at a decent level. And I believe for the men's teams, it's similar. It's maybe a bit more difficult because some don't speak English that well. So then you get the translation from Urdu or Pashto and so on. But generally, because the coaches are also English speaking, it is mostly in English.
Yeah.
The language of cricket. I mean, it has been translated into the laws have been translated into German, but it's still weird.
Yes. Well, funny that you mentioned that. I did mention that to when I spoke to Estonian cricket a few weeks back, to David and Ragnar. I did mention that to them. I'm pretty sure I didn't speak to them about this on camera. I think it was off camera, about translating the laws of cricket into the language of that country for associate countries, for them to understand. But as you mentioned, some languages are quite easy to do that. Other languages are quite hard to translate cricket terms or laws into, let's just say, German, for example, which is difficult. So it's definitely being tried, but hasn't worked out quite that well. But maybe something that the ICC or the MCC could work on a bit better, maybe, in terms of making it easier for people to understand certain things about cricket, other laws or coaching clinics, or doing.
Yeah, I mean, there are. The ICC did a while ago some clips, just small ones, to say what is cricket, and they're available in about 6 or 7 languages. One of them in German. So that sort of as an introductory explanation is quite useful. I mean, I'm not sure how useful it is to translate the laws, and I mean, no new person to cricket will read them. So, yeah, probably have to have it, but nobody looks at it really.
No, it's often a struggle, isn't it? That's the big challenge. You have to see it before you can understand it, I suppose.
Yeah,
and then put it into practice with cricket, because it's just that game, really. In terms of you know, for the national sides going forward, in terms of tournaments, qualifications for women's T20 World Cups and men's T20 World Cups going forward, are both teams, you know, improving every tournament that they play in terms of these qualification tournaments? You've seen good improvement from tournament to tournament, or still a lot of work to do?
Yeah, I mean, still a lot of work to do, obviously. I mean, we didn't qualify in Jersey last year after that nightmare tour. That was horrendous. So I don't want to go back to Jersey anytime soon. Sorry to say, but it was just horrendous. It was, yeah. So I mean, that's where I think most people expected us to qualify, and we were close, and we should have qualified. At most parts, we played okay or well enough, but at the crucial moments, we didn't. So yeah, that's something we need to rectify for the next time round. So the women are playing a tri-series in July at home against Italy and Jersey. And then let's say if we manage another series later on in the year in September, depends a bit what's happening. Yeah, and the men obviously have their qualifier to go through. And that is the first round, and Germany is hosting for the first time a men's qualifier, so that will be quite interesting, like having, I don't know, 10 teams at 2 grounds, so that's quite close to me. Actually, one of them is my club ground, so yeah, I'll going to be there and have a look at a few times, I think, when I can manage to get away from work. But yeah, so they have to go through the first round of qualifiers again. The last time I think they didn't, because they had managed to get to the global qualifier before that, so they didn't have to do the first round, they could do the second round. Yeah, but so that's basically what's lined up this year. And then for the women, it's a qualifier again next year.
Yeah.
I'm sometimes losing a bit track of what qualifier is happening when, because obviously the ICC changes their schedule every so often, like how many years in between. And
it can get a bit messy, can it? Yes, everyone loses track of what's happening. You don't know what series is on or anything like that. That's sort of the case with international cricket at the moment. The schedule's all over the place. Can't keep track of things. But that's good to hear. That's good to hear that there's some cricket on the horizon, and some opportunities to get better and develop more, which is fantastic. And since both of the teams have been playing, both teams debuted in 2019 in terms of playing T20 nationals for women's and men's, and they've played a lot of cricket since then. The women have played 38 matches in that time, and the men have played 54. So that's a reasonable size and amount of cricket to play. And they've had some good wins, and they've lost a few games, but that's good that they're playing a lot of cricket. Also in these tournaments, but also against other countries as well, bilaterally, which is very important. Is there, good relationships with other countries in the region in Europe, with Germany, in terms of, we'll play some games and, come and play some games in Germany. We'll go over there and play some games in your country. How's that relationship been?
I think quite good. I mean, obviously, in going back to 2020, when we were really lucky to get to Oman in February. I mean, I know Tina mentioned it. It wasn't just that it was just before the pandemic hit big time, but also the Sultan had died a week before, and really they were in mourning. There was actually not really any sport allowed in that week, and we got exemption because we had already booked everything and were on the way. So again, there were a lot of obstacles in that tour, and we had a brilliant time. Obviously, we won our matches and came back, and 2 weeks later everything was in lockdown, and but then managed in the same year that the tour to Austria, which was one-sided, but on the other hand, I think those matches need to be played to help other countries and other nations to develop their team, and Austria has developed a great deal since then. They're obviously also struggling a bit with the base, so with numbers of players, but I think they have developed quite well, and so those relations have always been good. As I say, we started our national team in Austria, so that's quite good. And then in the past we had some tours to Italy, and now they're coming to us. And we've been to Jersey, and now they're coming to us. So even before the official T20Is, there was always some European tournament, women's tournament going on since I think the first one was 2011. I'm right, in Belgium. Which was just sort of a festival that wasn't too serious. Hungary was there at the time, Germany, Belgium, and I think a mixed team from the Netherlands. And then in 2012 we went to, it was Netherlands hosting, and 2013 was Jersey hosting. 2014 was the biggest with 7 countries in Berlin. That was quite an event, and so it kept going. We really managed to do something of our own back, sort of, without the ICC, to keep women's cricket going and keep women interested in playing. And then obviously it was 2019, the T20I status changed a lot, I think, because now every match is 4 points. You can't really play for fun fun in inverted commas, to try things out or whatever. You can't. You're playing for points, ranking points. So that in a way is a bit of a shame. But on the other hand, you know where you stand. That basically also made Oman and Rwanda quite interesting, because it told us where we really stand in the rankings. If you only ever play your own continent, at some point, well, first of all, you played everybody and you know everybody. And in women's cricket, there's not every country has a women's team yet. But it also doesn't tell you anything how you are in relation to other continents or other nations outside of Europe. So in that sense, Oman and Rwanda, Oman in a good way, Rwanda was not successful, was not good. But yeah, it taught us a lot.
Definitely. That's really encouraging to hear that, these opportunities and relationships between countries, and that's really benefiting, well, the women's team, obviously, but also the men's as well. And it's benefiting everyone, really, to continue to improve and get better. And and we've already seen that. So may that continue as the years progress. Are you optimistic about the future for both teams going forward in terms of success and hopefully one day, qualifying for, a tournament at ICC level in the years to come? How do you see the future for both teams going forward?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you have to be, otherwise, what's the point? You don't want just go with the flow. You do want to achieve something, and I mean, in that sense, something has happened. So the men's team changed their coach last year to Atik, who's got a lot of experience, and I think bringing in new ideas and yeah, different approach. And the women changed their coach due to Michael sort of retiring, stepping down. But with Alistair, it's a really experienced coach as well, who's, yeah, I mean, he's still really new. He will be coming over next week. Oh no, this week it is. Sorry. For the second training camp this year. So yeah, still have to find our feet, but so far it's going really well. So I think we will be going from strength to strength and getting stronger. Yeah, I think so. Both teams are on the up. I'm convinced of it.
Definitely. And hopefully that continues on in the years to come, and we see that improvement. I think everyone wishes Germany all the best. I think that's what you want from associate teams, is to get better and improve and look to be seen and be noticed, I suppose, and make people take notice and that and I think that's what both teams are doing in Germany, the women's and the men's team. They're doing that, showing that improvement, and everyone's optimistic about what's ahead, which is fantastic. So I think everyone would agree with me and say that we wish the teams all the best. I'll be watching with close interest. As always, being a cricket tragic, I like to cast my eye on everything that's happening around the world. It's very hard to keep track because there's so much cricket on these days. But yeah, no, I think everyone wishes everyone, all of the German teams, the women's and the men's, all the best for the future going forward.
Okay, I found this on the web for all the teams.
Sorry about that, everyone. Siri just went off. Recognized my voice there. Not now, Siri. Not now. We're talking. We're having a chat. Sorry about that, everyone. Until Siri abruptly interrupted my my thoughts there about the German cricket teams there. Anyway, let's get back on track. Okay. Excuse me. All right, we're back. Keep it rolling. Let's just go through it. Let's just go with the flow. Anyway, after that interruption from Siri, yeah, as I was saying before, I was interrupted by Siri. Yeah, I think everyone wishes both teams success, and hopefully they rise through the rankings as well, which is an important thing, which we'll talk to about in a minute when it comes to the growth and development of the game in Germany. But also, it's more of an associate cricket sort of issue as well, because you get more funding and money the higher you are ranked. So it's important that both teams continue on that upward trajectory because of that reason. But hopefully that's the case. So hopefully they do well and win games and win series and tour the world, basically, and experiencing what cricket's like, touring other countries and embracing what cricket has to offer and different cultures. So hopefully that continues, and hopefully we see some good results in the near future, Monika, with both teams from Germany. Hopefully that's the case. So I think everyone, yes, fingers in fists, which is fingers crossed. That's a European thing, everyone. So good luck, and hopefully that's the case going forward. But yeah, I think everyone will be watching with close interest, that's for sure. So thank you for sharing your insights and thoughts on the women's and men's teams there. And I think everyone's learned a lot from listening to you talk about the women's and the men's teams, and we'll be watching with close interest, that's for sure, after listening to this episode on German cricket. Monika, I thought we'd talk about the growth and development of cricket within Germany, and in terms of getting cricket into local communities, clubs, schools, grassroots, etc., which you've touched on a little bit in our chat today. You're talking about your experiences and playing club cricket and all that stuff. But Monika, this is one of the challenges that many associate nations have, is how they introduce cricket and promote it. That's easier said than done in a country that's not familiar with the sport. So there are many questions to ask, basically, of a cricket federation or a cricket association in these associate countries. Basically sitting back in your chair, scratching your head, saying, how do we do all this stuff? How do we introduce the game into the country? So, you know, how does the German Cricket Federation try to introduce cricket into the community? How does it establish grassroots cricket, local clubs and local communities, competitions and pathways and underage comps, because you need a good talent pathway and system for players to go to the top level, playing for the national teams. Having facilities, that's a tricky one, isn't it? Access to nets, grounds, available for people to access, not only for the national teams, but for people in local clubs and communities who have clubs in those areas in Germany, but they don't have anything to train. They don't have any facilities. And making cricket accessible to people as well. That's often a difficult one. And getting cricket into schools and their programs, you know, trying to introduce kids into cricket from a young age in schools and get them inspired to play cricket. So Monika, what does, sorry, let me try and get that out. It's all a bit over the place in this episode today. Siri interrupted me. Now I can't get my words out because it's the early hours of the morning here as we're doing this chat. So bear with me, everyone, as I try and get back on track here. Oh, well, you just go with the flow, I suppose. It's
exactly.
So Monika, what challenges does the German Cricket Federation have in trying to grow and develop cricket in the German community? And do you ever see cricket becoming, you know, a mainstream sport in Germany? So your thoughts on that?
I think you already mentioned all the challenges in your question there. I mean, first of all, and I find that really sad. Germany is a really one sport country. There's football, then there's football, and then there's football, and then there's a long time nothing, and then there's football, and then some other sport. So it is really difficult in that sense, especially if people haven't got the patience to try and understand what's going on and just dismiss cricket as being too complicated and whatever, and you're just standing around. I mean, T20 has already improved it, and colored clothing has improved it. Because before the questions came, well, who's on which team if they're all wearing white? I mean, it's obvious to you and me who's on which team, but obviously to a lot of people it isn't. So in that sense, colored clothing has already helped a bit. So there are loads of different things being tried and worked on. I mean, schools is one thing. Again, then you have the challenge of that education is a state subject, so every state has their own sort of guidelines and rules and whatever of what to do with PE. So what might go well in one state might not be allowed in another state, and so on. So it is really difficult in that sense. And then you have obviously, and every associate country, or most of them can feel the volunteers you need to do that. So if that most PE teachers don't know what cricket is, so how can they teach the kids? So either you've got the volunteers go in as an after-school club, or you start training the PE teachers, which we actually have done in the past as a project to see if that would work. It did work for a bit. It has sort of fallen asleep again as well. So that's something. And then you also mentioned facilities, yeah. And as I said before, you've got so many teams competing for the few facilities and pitches, and we're not even talking about installed pitches. So just for non-associate listeners, forget about turf pitches. We're not talking about turf pitches. We're talking about astro pitches, and even then, the installed ones are far and few between. Quite a few are played on wooden planks being laid down on the day with a carpet on top on a football field. So you can imagine the size of the ground and the pitch. And so they're all challenges which we need to work on, and it's a slow process to convince the stakeholders, be it the clubs or the local government or whoever, to say, well, actually, you've got so many now Indian students coming and whatever, and they want to play their sport. They're not interested in football. You need to offer something, and through that sort of then drag in the German population as well, when they see it, when they're exposed to it, to think, oh, like me, might give it a go. Just interesting. I mean, in that sense, it's the sort of exotic sport, because then it will attract, because it is different to football, and some people get sick of football. One good point is, sort of the light, not at the end of the tunnel, but is that Germany is now a member of the German Olympic Association, because obviously cricket will be Olympic in 2028. And as soon as the sport is Olympic, you basically become a member. It can mean financial help, but it mainly will help with access to facilities and improving facilities and funding. But again, for that, you need to jump through a lot of hoops in terms of administration and whatever. So we still need to, there's still a lot of work to be done to fulfill the criteria to get then funding and access to those facilities. Like that.
Yeah.
But it is definitely possible now, because before that, we were already trying to become a member, but the criteria for a non-Olympic sport is really high. So in one region, you would need 10,000 members to become a regional member of that Olympic association. Well, in the whole of Germany, we only have about 6,000 or 7,000 players. So so in that makes it much easier now, and that hopefully will help also with promotion, PR, and so.
Yeah, definitely.
And sorry, again, if you're looking forward to 2028 Olympic Games, and we're looking at a longer period here, is actually seeing it on telly. That will make such a difference. Because, I mean, if you look at similar sort of, I use the word exotic now, sports in Germany. It's because they have been shown on on television. I mean, American football, darts, even snooker. It's because it can be watched, people see it, and then if commentators explain what's going on, people will understand it, and then it becomes interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, it is a definite game changer, the Olympics, and many associate countries I've interviewed in this series have said the same thing, and they've said, yeah, it's definitely going to make a big difference to us in terms of promoting and getting people across the sport, which is fantastic. And obviously a lot of challenges still to overcome in Germany in terms of trying to grow and develop the game, as many associate countries have, really, and have to try and navigate these difficult challenges. But you will get there eventually. It's just, as you said, going to take time. And it's a slow build, really. It's a marathon, not a sprint, as they say. so yeah. Well, hopefully, you can get the results that you want. In terms of the ICC, in terms of their contribution, their support, do you feel like they're doing enough to support associate countries across the board in terms of trying to grow and develop the game from your perspective?
No.
Well, I thought that was going to be your answer. And,
being German here, short and direct. No, it is. No, I could go on forever with that topic, but I mean, again, looking at the women's game, why not increase the number of teams in the World Cup to the same as the men have? There are enough countries playing at a decent enough level. I mean, if you look at the under-19s women's World Cup beginning of last year in South Africa, I mean, who would have thought of Rwanda beforehand and they did really well. So just as an example, so it's definitely developing, but it still needs a lot more to do. And obviously, financial equality, inequality. No, what's the word? Not equal. I mean, it doesn't even need to be equal, but the distribution needs to be better. Big three, and the rest can fight for the scraps. That's not how you develop a sport worldwide.
No.
And most other sports have. I mean, even football have extended their World Cup in numbers of teams participating. Most other sports have gotten the message and doing something different to the ICC. So yeah. In terms of, I have to say, what I thought of ICC. It's not really ICC, but if I look at other continents like the Asian Cup or the African Cup, there's nothing like that in Europe. The European Cup, where men and women have a regional competition to play in. So they, in those areas, they get a lot more matches and much experience than we do in Europe.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah. Well, they're not the flavor of the month. Let's just say that, the ICC.
That's a very nice way of saying it.
Yes. They're not. Let's just put it this way. They're not quite doing their job. They could do it better. Let's just put it that way. A lot of people are frustrated, but many people I've spoken to in this associate cricket series have said, in terms of the regional body of the ICC, like ICC Europe, Americas, etc., they've said they've been very helpful in terms of offering them resources and help. So that's good.
That is true. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I need to give credit there. Yes, that is true. I was thinking of the overall.
Yeah.
And that's where the regional offices, I mean, are stuck in the middle. So they I think do probably the best they can do with the resources and what they are given and told to do. So yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, definitely. They've said that the regional bodies of the ICC have done pretty well to help them and support associate nations, whereas the ICC as a whole haven't quite done enough in terms of giving associate nations a vote at meetings or board meetings, because they don't have voting rights, really, barely, none at all. So they don't really have a say on any matters. It's left up to the 4 member countries, and they have their say in their votes or whatever. Probably a bit of selfishness, maybe a bit of looking after your self-interests, which I suppose in a way you sort of have to do to try and make sure your country's doing well, but also think about the bigger picture as well, and that cricket's a global game and a sport, and that we have 96 associate members now of the ICC, a part of the cricket family. So you've got to try and help them out as well. If you want the game to grow and develop and continue to do that, you need to help these smaller countries out, like Germany and like these other countries that basically don't have a foundation to build on. And so they have to start from scratch and need that funding and money to do what they need to do. In terms of the rankings as well, do you think that could be improved? Because that's a difficult system to understand for people who don't understand how that works. Do you think it could be a lot simpler rather than the rankings, because you don't play the same amount of games, men's and women's, and then you're playing a team that's ranked lower than you, but they are different in the rankings, so to speak, how it's calculated at that. It doesn't really quite make sense. Do you think the ICC could maybe revisit their ranking system when it comes to associate countries, in terms of not putting that pressure on associate countries that you have to rank, be up here in the certain amount of, top 20 or 30 or whatever to get this amount of money or something like that? Do you think it could be a lot simpler than that?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't understand the calculations behind the ranking, so it's every time a surprise to me when the new rankings come out and something changes, and you're like, all right, okay, but yeah, I'm not too sure what would be the best way to judge it, but yeah, as I said before, it is quite an imbalance, because if you don't play against certain teams outside your area, you might never know. It gives you a totally false picture. I mean, as I said, we were ranked, our best ranking, the women's team was 24, I think. And currently we're at 33 or 32. I'm not sure actually. But yeah, in the lower 30s. But yeah, it is a quite. There hangs nowadays a lot on it. I mean, yeah, as soon as we're in the 20s, it means a lot more money, and that's just hard. How can you improve yourself if you haven't got the money? And the ones that get the money anyway get rewarded with, yeah. So it's quite difficult. It's a difficult subject.
Yes, yeah, I think most people would agree with that. Yeah, it's not always simple, isn't it? It seems difficult for associate nations to try and
Nothing in cricket is really simple.
No, yeah, that's true. Nothing in cricket's really that simple, isn't it? You can plan something, but it doesn't plan out the way you want to.
Yeah.
So I suppose with associate cricket, that's the same thing as well. Maybe the ICC are making things a bit harder for associate nations to try and really get established and get a foot in the door. Maybe just adding these, regulations or criteria or requirements. Maybe just thinking, you know what, maybe that's a little bit too out of reach, maybe for certain countries to obtain.
And I think it also would, like countries like the Netherlands and Ireland have said sort of, well, there's no incentive or no obligation for higher ranked teams to play lower ranked, because I mean, if they were to lose against the lower ranked, they lose a lot of points, but they're not gaining anything by winning against them. So why should they do that?
Yeah.
So how can you unless it's an ICC tournament or qualifier or whatever, in bilateral, you don't need to. So why would you?
Yes.
And then it makes it even harder for the lower teams to get points and climb up the ladder.
Yeah, that's definitely true, and I agree with that. With what you said there, yeah, they can definitely make it a bit simpler and a bit easier for teams and less complicated, I suppose, and make it easier for associate nations to try and, be the best they can and just play cricket and look to grow and develop the sport in those countries. And then you also have the situation which happened with France cricket recently. What happened there? So some cricket boards and associations have to resort to doing that sort of thing because of the pressures and the strains. And that was a bit of an ugly situation, wasn't it? So, many problems the ICC have to try and navigate and try and work out and just work together, I suppose. I don't think we do that enough in cricket. The ICC have these mottos and visions and values, and I don't think they're quite living up to them at the moment. You need to work together. Otherwise, you're not going to get anything done. That's the important.
Yeah, that's actually one subject which doesn't reflect good on ICC Europe at all. Because, I mean, one reason why they did it is to have France women play in the ICC qualifiers, which you're only allowed to do if you've got 8 domestic teams.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how their checks. Well, obviously non-existing. I mean, there were quite a few of us who knew that they didn't have 8 teams. Or we not knew for certain, but we had our serious doubts that there were 8 teams in France. And that report basically just proved it. But yeah, and it doesn't reflect good at all.
No, yeah. Well, I suppose these things happen, I suppose, and you have to learn from these incidences and mistakes, and that's the part of the learning process, I suppose, for everyone involved. But yeah, the growth and development side of associate cricket with the ICC can be a lot better, and many people share the same thoughts, and so yeah, they can do better in certain areas, that's for sure, and that's why many cricket fans are not quite happy with them at the moment, across everything, really, not just associate cricket, but the games operated and run, and what's happening in international cricket as a whole can be better. So yeah, definitely can do better. It's like a school report card, isn't it? Do well in certain areas, but can do better in this area.
Can do better.
Yeah. So hopefully they can do better. But going back to the growth and development of Germany cricket, obviously we went a little bit off course there a little bit, but it's good to get your thoughts on that, about the ICC and all that stuff. But back to growth and development of the game in Germany, Are you really optimistic about the future of the growth and the development side of the game in Germany? Do you think it will, really take off and people get behind the sport?
Again, it will take a while. I think we sort of, after growing quite quickly over 3-4 years, or maybe even 5 years, we're now sort of a bit at a stagnant point.
Yeah.
Where it requires a lot more effort and more thought and more resources to further grow. So yeah, overall, I think it will grow with more teams, more opportunities. It will grow, but I think at a much slower rate than it did the last 5 years. That's my personal opinion. Unless there is a super duper campaign with the Olympic Association to go into every school and they give us the resources for that to do that, then it might be quicker. But I think it will grow, I'm sure, but as I say, slower than it has been.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's going to take a while for it to grow and develop the game in Germany, but some good signs at the moment, which is nice.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is you want to do it in a sustainable way. You don't want to have 5 more women's team next year, only for 3 of them to collapse again by the end of that season or whatever. So I think that's why it might also be good to go at a slower rate if you make it sustainable.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to take time. It's going to take it's a marathon, not a sprint, to achieve these things, as you say. But really encouraging signs from what you have told me and in this chat today, that it's encouraging. People are noticing cricket. Kids are getting involved, boys and girls, which is fantastic. Obviously, being a part of the Olympics now, which helps with that side of the game as well, getting that exposed to people. But yeah, no, really encouraging signs, and that's good to hear. And hopefully, going forward, that upward trajectory can continue. As you mentioned, you're in a bit of a holding pattern at the moment, which can happen. But you can definitely get past that and definitely go back on that upward trajectory to grow and develop the game. But yeah, many associate nations face the same problems across the board, but they're doing their best to get through them. And from what I've heard in this series from interviewing people, I've heard a lot of good things in terms of programs and what they're doing there. So it's fantastic to hear that not only Germany, but all of the other countries that I've interviewed in this series, the growth and development side of the game is really taken off, and it's really encouraging to build that foundation and base. So hopefully we'll continue to get better and better as the years progress, Monika, and hopefully the game will really take off in Germany. And you got to be optimistic. You got to be passionate. You got to hope. Fingers in fists, as they say over there in Germany, for good luck rather than fingers crossed. But yeah, hopefully that's the case going forward, and hopefully we see the game really take off and prosper. And that's what everyone wants to see from associate countries going forward. So it's great to hear your thoughts on the growth and development side of the game in Germany there, Monika. Well, Monika, we've reached the end of a long discussion today. We've only got one more topic to go, and you'll be relieved to hear that. Well, it's been great. It's been a great chat. I really enjoyed it. We've got one more point to discuss in our chat before we finish today, Monika. And I thought we'd talk about what the future holds for cricket in Germany. Now, it's very hard to predict the future, as we know. But, look in the crystal ball and see what the future and outlook is going forward in the years to come. So, Monika, how do you see Germany cricket and associate cricket going into the future? If you had to look into the crystal ball and predict an outcome or an outlook, how do you see the future?
Oh, that's a really difficult one. It's a bit what's realistic and what do I wish for. So, I mean, for associate cricket, I wish for a really better standing and more support from the ICC, more resources, more acknowledgement what's being achieved, more like rewards in as I say World Cup places for more teams and things like that. I mean, it's really the basis of overall cricket, and to grow cricket in the world, it needs the associate countries. I mean, you can continue in your bubble of 10 or 12 teams, but I mean, that gets boring after a while as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the exciting matches come from Netherlands versus India, and not for the 50th time India versus Australia. Sorry to say, but yeah. The future for cricket in Germany, again, as I said, I think it will continue to grow at a slower rate, and I hope that the membership of the Olympic Association will really help to be a game changer in Germany, to be more recognizable, and you don't get asked anymore where your horse is, and things like that, that people will recognize cricket as the sport it is. So yeah, that's in rough terms what I think the future holds. And my hopes are, say it like that, because I mean it's really difficult to say what the future really holds. It doesn't help that the ICC changes their policies every 18 months about qualifying needs to be played and what placements will qualify for what and stuff like that. A bit more consistency would be nice, that people or countries and associate countries know over a period of 10 years, for example, what they're working towards, what their goal is, what they can achieve, and what the reward would be, and not every 2 years something else comes up. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sort of. I hope that wasn't too negative.
Yeah. No, that's good to hear your predictions and outlooks for the future ahead for Germany cricket, but also associate cricket. And hopefully those predictions you mentioned can come into some reality, but we'll have to wait and see what happens in the years to come. As I mentioned, it's very uncertain, the future, so we don't know as yet, but hopefully those predictions can come true in some way, and hopefully benefit Germany cricket, but also associate cricket as well, and that's the main thing. So thank you, Monika, for your predictions into the future and looking into the crystal ball, going into the years to come for Germany cricket and associate cricket. So much appreciated for you sharing those thoughts with us in this chat. Monika, thank you for joining me today for this Associate Cricket Series episode to discuss all things Germany cricket. We finally got there in the end. Both of us are suffering from a lack of sleep. I had to wake up early in the morning to do this chat with Monika because she's sacrificing her sleep in the early hours of the morning in Germany there to try and get this chat done for everyone today. But we managed to get through it all right. And despite some interruptions from Siri, which was a bit funny, we got through it. We pushed through the lack of sleep. We pushed through the interruptions, and we got it done. So that's the main thing. So pat on the back for both of us on getting that done. But I've really enjoyed it, Monika. Thank you for giving up your time. I've really learned a lot from just chatting to you about Germany cricket, and I think everyone listening and watching would feel the same as well. They've learned something, and that's the whole idea of this Associate Cricket Series, is that these episodes provide that education and learning about associate countries, and definitely a lot of people take a lot of things out of this episode today that we did on Germany cricket. So Monika, if people want to get in touch with you, or with the German Cricket Federation, or whoever is in charge in Germany when it comes to cricket, where can people do that if they want to speak to you about Germany cricket or get in touch with the federation? Where can they all do that?
I mean, we're on all social channels. So the women's national team are the Golden Eagles, either on Instagram, Facebook. We're not on TikTok, but even on X we are. And cricket.de is the German association, again on all channels, on all social media channels, or website, old-fashioned. So you can find us there.
Yeah, definitely. We'll leave links to those in the description of this episode for people to check out all things German cricket, and wanting to discover more and learn more, or even if they are in Germany themselves, they want to play cricket or get involved there, they can go to those links and get in touch with the right people and play the game of cricket in Germany and grow and develop the sport, which is fantastic. So as I said, we'll leave links to those in the description of this episode. Before we go, remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Also, the podcast is available on Anchor, Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts. Once again, thank you, Monika, for joining me today to discuss all things Germany cricket. I hope all of you watching or listening to this Associate Cricket Series episode learned a lot about cricket in Germany from Monika. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.